Welcome, everyone, to another episode of What Exit Jersey Stories. I'm your host, Nick Franco, and with us, as always,
Peter Riario.
And joining us today, a longtime friend of myself, and a local educator, just all-around great person. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Pedro Del Vecchio.
Pedro, welcome today.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome.
And why I bring up the point of educator is, let's talk about New Jersey education. I think it also doesn't get discussed enough nowadays, but and of course, right now since we're in the middle of a pandemic, things have been a little different for those that are not aware.
Mm-hmm.
So, Pedro, why don't you give us a little background on yourself as far as when it comes to teaching itself? Like, how long have you been teaching in the system?
So I guess I've been teaching 10 years with a big gap in the middle because I left to take care of my family. So I teach elementary school. I was in first grade. I've pretty much taught every grade, so up to fifth. And to say that this is a different year is an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just a little bit. Now, now you've taught primarily at the same school, or
most of my time has been at the same school. Yep.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what was I going to say? You actually are teaching the same school system as you grew up in as well.
Yep, same school, in fact. Same school, same system. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten very far.
I was going to say, I don't know how common that is, or because I do know some of the other teachers within the system, and in fact, some of them are related to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, there's quite a few actually who've come back, and this is home, and come back to pass on what they've been given, I guess.
I was going to say, what drives, what drove you to want to endeavor the field of education, and and come back to your hometown to do so?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because that's often an icebreaker in different professional developments we have, and I'm always a little sheepish to say it, but I say it anyway. It was because I thought I could change the world. I sort of pondered every which way that I could impact. If you look at all the sort of troubles in society, from poverty to food insecurity to child abuse and substance abuse and just everything, homelessness, the intersection of all of those things happens where there's really no choice. Every person that's part of society passes through a school. So I felt like,
right,
okay, I can touch that. Now, 10 years in, I'm a little more realistic, but it's still kind of my goal, if I'm honest.
right.
And I think it's a goal that you should never drop, because that's the thing. New Jersey and the world at large needs more educators like yourself that have those goals in mind, that you want to make a difference, you want to change the world, and give people that may not have per se had a chance prior to having an education to you give them a fighting chance. You give them the tools necessary to make it in today's world.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly the hope, and
Right,
working with the little ones. It's I don't always see it right away because they have so much other education before them, but it's always nice when they sort of come back and I find out where they are or hear what they're doing from other people.
Excellent. No, now, being that it's been 10 years, have you had any I'm trying to think, let's see, well, you may have some close to graduation or just graduated, maybe?
I think the class I started with when I was first in this district was a fourth grade class, so I got a little bit of a jump.
Okay, sorry.
So I believe they're seniors now, and
Excellent.
I see them around town, which is also why I like living where I teach. I
Right.
see them in the store. I do have to get dressed to go to Target because you never know, but but I love it. I love running into them and finding out what they're up to.
Excellent. Now, did you have particular teachers that were your favorites also growing up that also may have possibly either were an inspiration to you, or that maybe that you look back on and it's like, oh, okay, you know, I want to do things a little more like this teacher or this administrator?
Definitely. It would be dangerous to name names because I'm in touch with so many teachers that I had, and all of them had some impact and some.
Got it.
But in particular, it's just those relationships that you build with people. So it's not. I can't say, well, this lesson was the best. It's little just sort of experiences, them sharing something from themselves, and you know, they become your family. So those are the kind of things.
But were there particular classes? You know, again, we're not going to name names with the teachers, but were there particular classes that you found more memorable, or like certain events that happened like in those particular classes that like, oh, okay, stood out to you, that, you know, like, oh, wow, yeah, if I could do the same thing, yeah, this would.
I would guess, like, as sort of a general category, just the classes that sort of allowed you to interact with other students and sort of stretch a little bit. They were a little more social. Like, I tended towards more the humanities than the maths and sciences.
Same here.
Okay.
And I think they gave me a little more
you left
flexibility.
that to Rich, right?
Yeah, yeah. My husband's a science educator, and all my kids are going into science. But you know, that's good. Yeah, but I think that kind of flexibility and like band, for example, being a part of the band, which I was no great musical talent, but you know, it just allows you to kind of be part of something. And actually, a lot of my again, I wasn't a great athlete by any stretch, but being on teams, so it really had to do with those sort of social connections. That were really
you did what, swimming, I think, and what,
I
track,
did a brief stint with swimming, and I did track. Yeah, I was a
That's
shot
what I
putter.
did too.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
wow, nice.
And a discus thrower, but shot putter just sounds so glamorous. So
Show strength, though.
There you go.
Mhm.
Well, do you know, like, you know, like, for this question's to both of you, do you know where New Jersey stands when it comes to the actual national rankings in education? And what we're going to be talking about is education of like pre-K to 12. Do you know offhand, Pedro?
How about I take a guess?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, that's Peter.
Yes, Peter. Oh, I'm sorry. I swear to God, I thought you said Pedro, which some of my friends call me.
Oh, that's funny.
No problem.
I'm named for a Peter, and I have a son, Peter. So I'm.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
It all connects. Yeah.
It does.
No, but Pete. Okay, so starting with you, Pete.
Sure.
Do you know where New Jersey stands, as you know, national rankings go?
Is it anywhere between 4 and 8, or is it or am I way off here?
You're not way off.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to say 8. How about that?
Okay.
In the country. Yeah.
Now, Pedro.
There we go.
What would you say?
So I'm cheating a little bit because I think you mentioned it when we were chatting. So I think we're second.
Okay. And yes, we were chatting earlier. And according to U.S. News rankings, New Jersey ranks second in the nation in pre-K to 12th grade education, just behind Massachusetts.
That's great.
When we actually break down like where we are, we're actually second in high school graduation rate. We're fourth in the NAEP, which, for those that do not know, that's the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Were you familiar with them, Pedro? Or?
Yes, I've heard of them. Yep.
Yeah. Well, according to the NAEP, we're fourth in math scores. We're second in NAEP reading scores. We're second in preschool enrollment, and we're fifth in college readiness.
It's pretty impressive.
It is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give you another stat that's actually pretty cool, too. When you actually look at the U.S. News rankings, we're the only state that placed in the top 10 in every category. Massachusetts may be number 1, But I forget which of the categories, they actually placed 13th.
Wow.
But they actually have a couple of number ones in there, so that, that weights the rankings a little higher in their favor. So,
right.
Curse you, Massachusetts! No, no,
Mm.
no.
Oh, I'd love to
Massachusetts is
take
great.
credit for all of that. Can I do that? Since I'm just
You can.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
And Pedro.
You are part of the collective there to do that. Yeah.
No, but it is true though. You are part of why we rank so high in education. Now, I'm going to jump to another ranking system, which is the Education Week Research Center. Are you familiar with them, Pedro?
I've read some articles by them. Yeah.
Okay, and how about you, Pete? I'm
No, actually, no, but
Okay.
I'd like to know more.
Well, according to Education Week Research Center, actually, New Jersey for the past 2 years has placed first in the nation in public school education, with an aggregated score of 87.3, which makes us B+ students.
Take that.
And that's the highest that we get, right?
Yeah, in the nation right now. Yeah, that's the highest out there. Massachusetts is behind us in their rankings, but also placing a B+.
Okay.
That's good.
So here's a question to both of you. What makes New Jersey education so highly ranked?
I'll default to Pedro for this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. As much as I really would love to take credit for all that, all of the research sort of says that student success is most closely tied with parental education and economic stability. So as much as I would love to say it's because we're the best of the best, and I think all my colleagues are wonderful, and I do think we do a really good job, I think that there are factors outside of us that drive that quite a bit. And if you look at Massachusetts, it's also a wealthy state, highly educated. Everyone who goes to college in Boston stays there forever. So I think there's a few factors. I also think, from now focusing more on what teachers do in New Jersey, we have a strong association where our teachers have unionized very strongly, and I know people don't always love sort of what we fight for, but it does allow for teachers to dig our heels in and say, no, this is what works. This is what's good for our kids.
Right.
So I think that's very powerful. I mean, I'm on all kinds of message boards with teachers throughout the country, and the abuse and disrespect that they have to tolerate is just horrifying. And we don't have that. We're treated very well.
Imagine. I really can only imagine that, like how other parts of the country, how the same processes, well, not to say the same processes, but when going through the system, it just, because when I looked at those rankings, you had states such as, when it came to the U.S. news, I believe Mississippi was ranked last in the nation. And when it came to Education Week Research Center, it was New Mexico ranked last, which was a little surprise on that one. But like as you're saying though, what they have to deal with in other states, I can't picture. But yeah, New Jersey is one of the wealthier states, more well-to-do states. Although, if you look at New Jersey as a whole, there are many parts that struggle more.
Sure.
Such as places Newark, Camden, Patterson, that have had like more, if you want to say, the inner cities that it takes a little more to try to get the same results that other areas of the state. And I know for many years also in New Jersey, it's been an ongoing debate, like what was it, 92, Pedro, when the Abbott districts were, when they came out with that designation. Now that has changed too.
I don't know the year that all happened, but I do know that that's, you touch on the Abbott district. The Abbott districts were trying to correct the problem of localized funding.
Right.
And that's still something that is always debated.
Correct. Yeah. So, yeah, I can see where, us being a wealthier state, that, and as people probably know, New Jersey has higher taxes than more states out there, but a good portion does go to education.
Schools, right.
But is it enough? That's also for debate as well.
Right.
Because
it's never enough.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because so much more could be done, but how does it get balanced?
Right.
And because we have so many different towns and so many different school districts in New Jersey, you know what? That's something I forgot to break down. But for a state that is not necessarily the biggest state, we're the most densely populated state, but like we're if you look at a map and look at New Jersey versus a Texas, a California, or any place else, or some of our neighbors like New York and Pennsylvania, we're not a very big state.
Right.
No.
But we have many towns and school districts.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I know there's been some effort by the state recently to merge them, to pull. A lot of the smaller districts have been identified, and they're looking to merge them into bigger districts. But of course, there's resistance to that for, I guess, a lot of good reasons, and
right,
just personal reasons.
Yeah, good reasons, and sometimes maybe not so good reasons too.
Right.
Like I'm surprised that our district, we actually lost one of the towns that was part of our district.
Right.
I live in Hackensack, and for many years, Maywood was part of our district, and as of, I think, was it last year or last year? Yeah, it was a recent development. It may have been in 2019 that it was voted upon that Maywood would actually join the the East Rutherford district, I believe.
Beckton High School.
Yeah, Beckton High School, which is,
I'm not sure.
Or
that's regional, or I'm not sure if it's regional or local, but so I think that this year, for the first time, the 9th graders went there instead of Hackensack High School. Yes.
Yeah, which is crazy, because if you look on a map and look at Maywood to Hackensack and Maywood to East Rutherford, it's a bit of it's a little bit of a distance. Like, now, Pete, when you were younger, did you walk to school?
On certain days, I had to. Otherwise, I got driven. But I was very lucky, just because my school wasn't very far. Like less than a mile. So I'd have to take the bus. In other words, is what I was saying. Like,
Gotcha.
I get my parents to drive me. Yeah.
Right, but you were within decent walking distance.
Oh yeah. It would take a little bit, but it would take like maybe 25 minutes. We'll say something like that. So
and Pedro, you yourself also not too far from some of the schools, like
right,
like one of the schools we could pretty much fall into our backyard, and it's there.
Right.
But yeah, Maywood to East Rutherford is what, about 6 miles? I think.
I would think so. Yeah, down to
6, 7 or so miles. Versus Maywood to Hackensack, we're right next to each other.
So it's really in walking distance for a lot of the people.
Right. So a lot of the people that I went to school with, growing up in the Hackensack district, even though they were in Maywood, they walked to Hackensack. They walked to the Hackensack High School. But now, it's a little weird in thinking that. But these are the things that the New Jersey education system has been dealing with for many years. Like, okay, do you do a little more regionalization? Do you have a little more of a central school that incorporates more of the smaller towns, schooling system? My wife actually, she went to school in for high school in what was called Cedar Ridge, in the Old Bridge area, but she grew up in Lawrence Harbor. But Lawrence Harbor was part of the Old Bridge Township and school district. So, and she also wound up going to school with, I don't know why, but Brian O'Halloran, Dante from Clerks, Vitamin C, the singer, Juno Diaz, the author, and many other people.
It's like the fame school.
Yeah, it was like the fame school. I joke sometimes with her. It's like, wait, was it something in the water? Did you not drink it? What happened? Why? I love my wife, but it's just kind of funny that I think it was more of the grades around her, but not really necessarily her grade that had the famous people.
Right.
It was the ones above and below.
Pedro, how's the funding been from, both the federal government and the state government? Let's say in the last 10 years, would you say it's adequate, needs more, or underfunded? I mean, your personal.
It's gone up and down. I feel like there's a lot more because I don't know if we're called Title I anymore.
Mhm.
There's a new designation, ESSA, and Every Student Succeeds Act, I guess it is, the federal. So for that designation, and it has to do with how many students qualify for free and reduced lunch. So there's quite a bit of federal funding there. It's a grant that requires a lot, a lot of conformity and paperwork and proving that you're sticking to the guidelines and all that. So that money is there, but again, it can only be used for very specific things. State money has definitely kind of gone down and down. And I believe that originally when the lottery was first a thing, it was supposed to be all for funding education. And
right.
I think they found other uses for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, a little too many people, too many hands dipping into the same pot. And unfortunately, education gets left out of the equation at that point.
And then the cap was put on budget, so there's you can only go up 2% every year without certain loopholes that you have to jump through. So it's tight because there's more and more demands, and they're not all funded. So obviously, especially in this situation now with pandemic teaching, our district provided Chromebooks to every student and hotspots to as many as we could, as many as needed. And there was a delay, some had to wait and they got them. But I think right now everyone's got their equipment, which, we couldn't do this without that. But
how is it teaching though now in this remote? Just as we're doing a remote podcast, how is it doing a lesson plan when you have to plan for? Well, everyone's remote.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like nowadays?
It's nuts. It's really nuts. Now, being that it's January and I'm about to start back after a break, I'm just getting my head back around it. I would say that September, October, most of the time I was spent technologically troubleshooting. And I'm not a technological wizard. I'm fairly adept at using the different platforms that I need, but trying to walk 7-year-olds and their families, who many of them have never seen this type of software or platforms, through these things remotely was excruciating. I remember one particular Friday where I sort of like whipped my headphones off at the bell and said, "Oh, what did I just do? I did not teach one single thing." It was all day passwords and glitches and who doesn't have a log on. And it's really, and like I said, I'm pretty adept with the software and the platforms and the websites and the, all the different shortcuts that we can use. And not all of my colleagues are similarly trained. That's just sort of been an interest of mine. So I've caught up on it, but it's been really, really difficult.
Like that.
I can only imagine. And this comes from someone, I've been in the IT field for like 32 years. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how many times we've done, like, you're doing a virtual conference and, okay, well, so-and-so, this sales rep or this, this other IT branch, because I've worked for some large companies, like where you're dealing globally. So you're trying to get multiple countries on the same meeting. And it can be a struggle for IT people. Mm-hmm. So when you're dealing, as you said, you're dealing with families that may have no IT experience, no knowledge of, Chromebooks, the internet, like how it all, works, and especially, Zoom, or like, what do you guys use, by the way? Do you use like Google? Do you use Teams? Do you use like?
We're given a choice between Google Meets and Zoom. So I
Okay.
typically use Zoom just because when we started in April or March, I guess, early March, where the requirements for us were different. We were really just sort of keeping in touch with our students. Zoom had all the features already, whereas Google
Right.
Meets didn't, but now I believe they do. But I'm
Got it.
sort of, creature of habit. I'm used to it. But one of the things that
Know that feeling.
yeah, I
Mhm.
thought of the strangest thing about this really is the teaching in a fishbowl. Normally I'm in a classroom with 20 to 24 second graders, and sure, there's adults who walk in and out, and I'm observed, and I have colleagues who are in the room for different reasons, but pretty much it's my show. It's I'm in charge. I'm on stage. I do what I do.
Mhm.
Um, I can joke with my students. I can, walk over to them and give them a little pat on the shoulder to remind them that I'm still in the room and they're still supposed to be doing whatever the activity is. And
Yeah.
I can guide if I see someone's getting frustrated with a classmate they're working, all that stuff that's so sort of intangible. It never gets written in a lesson plan.
Right.
And I'm doing it in front of parents.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Right. I
all
never
of
thought of
the,
that.
You have a much wider audience than per se, like if you were in the regular classroom setting.
Mhm,
You have your students. You
mhm.
have like administrators that may happen in or out, as time goes. But yeah, you don't usually have the parents. Like in the classes, you have
Right.
parent-teacher like
Watching,
conferences,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
Mhm.
but not. It's like, hey, yeah, sit in on the class today. Yeah.
Right, and
Right.
I have to be. I'm a little silly with my students, and I'd be boring if I wasn't.
Of course.
And I've just kind of gotten past being embarrassed that I'm probably making a fool of myself. Every once in a while, I'll hear a parent laugh at me in the background. I'm like, oh, well.
It means you're doing
But
something right.
I hope so.
Yeah.
um, but the other part is that September is a difficult month every year, even a normal, fully
Mhm.
functioning year, and parents don't see how their kids struggle with us. They don't see that the kids don't understand all of our instructions and aren't quite, with it. It's just a
Mhm.
normal part of the growth process every September, and that's in every grade. In my grade, it's adjusting from a first grade to a second grade, but then my students will go on and have to adjust to third grade. So I think it was really hard for them to watch that and let their kids
Mhm.
struggle, which
Right.
I can understand why. They're there, so they feel like they need to jump in and make it easier. And in some cases, I think they felt frustrated with me that I wasn't sort of giving their child as much individualized attention as they probably would have
Ah,
liked.
Right.
got
You
it.
know, so it's tough. It's tough.
Was remote learning implemented in April or late March?
So we went remote very suddenly on March 13th. The school closed
Okay.
March 12th was the last day, and I remember that because when I went back to my classroom, the date was still on the board. It was eerie.
Oof.
It felt like it was like Vesuvius or Pompeii, or.
Yeah, when everything's frozen in summer. Mhm.
It was so strange.
Yeah.
Um, but we then took like 2 weeks of just sort of keeping in touch with the kids and
Mhm.
waiting and seeing and thinking, okay, spring break is coming. We'll be back after that. And then it just got longer and longer.
Yeah.
So during
Yeah.
that time, I was meeting with my students about 2 hours a day. And now we're doing a
Mhm.
full school schedule.
How big are your classes?
Um, 21, 20, they
21.
in that area. Yeah.
Okay.
So not terrible. Again, that's another thing, state to state. I hear of these states where they have 30, 35 kids in the class.
I can't
Wow.
even picture that.
Yeah.
Like
That's got to be hard to
even
manage. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's tough.
yeah.
Yeah, because like I know myself, like in grammar school, I went to Catholic school. I went to Holy Trinity, the local Catholic school at the time, and even our classes at that time weren't huge. We were like 26, maybe.
Mhm.
So it wasn't horrendous. But yeah, I do hear of these places where, well, yeah, we have so many more kids, we have no place to put the kids.
Right.
Yeah, we don't. And, actually, like our school system is actually, we have problems with room for actually students when they do come back to actual physical
Mhm.
classrooms.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this is something a lot of schools deal with that people don't realize.
Mhm.
Now, when you
Right.
ask a question, how do you manage, like, we're in a class and maybe that, raise your hand. What do you do with like a Zoom call? How is that different?
It's hard. Most of the kids have gotten used to it, so they'll use the little Zoom icon for,
Mhm.
Oh,
for
okay.
raising
Raised
your hand.
hand.
Oh, I
So
didn't
that's
even know that.
helpful. Yeah,
I didn't even know that existed. Okay.
right. The difficulty is that, the way I teach is so much more organic in the classroom. So
Mm,
even though they're not supposed to call out, they're supposed to talk one at a time. That's not the real world. It's certainly not
Right.
how adults behave in groups, and it's certainly not how little children
No.
behave. But because of the format, if two people are talking at once, you can't hear them. Whereas in a room, you might hear, oh, I've got something from across the room. That kid is on. I want to bring that to the forefront, or I want to. But they really have to be almost like they're standing in line, one at a time, and it's hard for them to wait. It's hard for
yeah.
them, and it's hard for me, because sometimes I know I'm going to call on this child who really wants to share something, but I know their internet connection's not so great, and I know they're
Yep.
going to glitch,
Ah.
or they're going to just wait and then ask me what time lunch is. Sometimes there's that too.
Right. Of course.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Makes
I was
perfect
going to
sense.
say, like, as far as we've come, like in voice over IP technologies and video over, like the internet as well. Yeah, it that lag that you have to deal with, yeah,
Hmm.
can be frustrating. Especially, we're doing this pod now, but Pete and I, we've done podcasts, of course, when we're in the same room and we have someone over, and we're actually all physically together, and it's a much more organic
Yeah. The
conversation,
dynamic is completely
right?
different,
Then
right? Yeah.
we've actually learned more on how to do these, because it's not the same thing. You actually have to listen and watch for the cues, because otherwise you're stumbling over each other, and when you listen to the audio, yeah, you've lost things.
Hmm.
right.
Well, I'm going to shift us a little bit. Well, actually, before we shift, I'm wondering, what do you think teaching is going to look like post-pandemic? Do you think we're just going to go back to business as usual? New Jersey education as usual, or do you think there might be actually, like hybrids of things? I know one of the things that people were saying, that's like, oh, now that we have this remote technology, do snow days happen?
That's yeah.
It's like, I remember being as a kid, yay, it's a snow day. Now it's
Yeah.
gonna be like, it's a snow day. Well, on to Zoom.
Yep. Exactly.
Our superintendent was merciful, and when we had the snow in December, at first it was like, well, we're just going to keep going because we can't afford to lose time. And then
Right.
he said, you know what? It's really going to be a bad snow. People are going to need to clean up. And I think he was really just taking some mercy on us all and giving us a day off. So, I mean, it really depends, because, like I said earlier, our IT team had to give out Chromebooks to every student. That's not typical. It is typical in the high school level, but in the elementary and middle schools, we have a one-to-one Chromebook, but they stay in the school building. So
Okay.
unless they have that, and unless everybody has Wi-Fi in their home, we really
Yep.
can't. We really can't just pick up, and the lessons would be different. So one of the things that is very different is, we have a lot of materials that the district purchases, math program, reading program, all different things. And while we, make creative, different activities that we want to bring in, we have a lot of materials to pull from. And with this, we have to create everything digitally.
Got it.
So I don't see how we could do that just knowing it's going to snow tomorrow. It takes a long time.
Got it.
Right.
So you'd have to send home all of their materials with them.
Oh, I have so much respect for you and for the other teachers. Like, particularly in our state, of course. Like, I'm biased, and and locally too, but but just educators everywhere. Like, what people do not realize what you go through, and
Right.
what and with the benefit of the students in mind. Yeah,
you know what?
Sometimes get lost.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that, because I think it's really important, and it's something I didn't mention before. I said I went into this to save the world. The most excruciating thing, I think I keep saying the most, the worst, the hardest, it's just difficult. But truly, the thing that has given me the most stress and worry has been not being able to truly check in. And this was so much worse in the spring because the attendance wasn't really well established. We didn't have a requirement per se. And there were students who I worried about daily when they were in my classroom, but I could pull them aside. I could invite them to have lunch with me. I could check in with them. How you doing? You know, is everything okay? And all of a sudden there was radio silence, and I worried and worried and worried and called them. And the most work was trying to keep in touch with children. And even now, I mean, I don't feel concerned for my students that I have now. I don't feel concerned for their safety. I think, you know, they all have reasonably supportive homes. But that's a scary thing when you know that they're in an unstable place.
Of course.
And you can't ask them about it because their parents might be sitting across the table from them. And
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's,
you know, it's been really scary. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, we need to get schools open because child abuse cases are going up, domestic violence. But the other part of that is, I know because a neighbor of mine, it works for Division of Child Protection and Permanency, and she's been furloughed. So I worry for those kids. So I don't mean to bring it to a negative point.
No. But it's something that people do not, people take for granted that, when kids are in school, teachers are looking after them, and like if there's problems, teachers will take care of. But at the same point, now we're in a different situation where it's like you don't have that same luxury. You don't have the same tools, resources.
Yeah. It's
hard.
Absolutely.
Just also very quickly, a couple of our friends checking in. Stuart Greenberg, he was saying, virtual sixth grade is killing me. And he was talking about walking to school, kindergarten and first grade in Lincoln Park. And our friend Chris Ryerson also says, hello. Hello, everyone.
Well, and I'll just as a side note, as a parent, 11th grade remote learning is killing me.
I can imagine.
I bet.
But I'm going to shift things to, we're going to talk, and we're going to try to go through this a little quickly, about someone who had the kids in mind, had a particular education system in mind, but how things played out, was it the right way? Well, we're going to talk about the story of Joe Clark. And for those that are not familiar with Joe Clark, he was the principal of Eastside High School in Patterson in the basically from 82 to 89. And it was also part of the Patterson education system for some time before that. And he was the subject of the movie Lean on Me, starring Morgan Freeman. So, to both of you, you've seen the movie?
Yes.
Yes, a while back. Yeah.
Okay. So, first question before we get into Joe Clark himself: how familiar are you with Patterson?
I know the waterfall there.
and you know what? That's actually an important thing, because besides being a pretty natural wonder there in Patterson, it also provided power for Patterson. Was like part of the Industrial Revolution. Like when you go from the 18th century into the 19th century. 19th century into the 20th century. Patterson was one of the leaders in industry. One of the reasons, the Great Falls. It was there to power a lot of the things, and was actually nicknamed also Silk City,
right?
Because of its prominent role in the production of silk in the late 19th century, early 20th century. But and there were many other industries that also thrived within Patterson at the time. But as years went on, post World War II, businesses move. Okay, we don't have to rely on waterfall power as much anymore. We're using the grid as is. Although people don't realize where some of that power comes from. Some of that's from waterfalls.
Yeah, hydropower.
Exactly. But Yeah, when you hit like the 1960s, Patterson really started finding itself into basically a decline, high unemployment, and unfortunately, the concept we went over this back on our episode of the long hot summer of 1967, the Newark riots and the Plainfield riots. The concept of white flight. A lot of people left Patterson and moved to the suburbs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of businesses left Patterson and moved to suburbs or moved out of state. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, as we went over how the local economy helps stimulate the local education system, yeah, Patterson was adversely affected and found itself in a decline for a good number of years. So, and just so you know, I'll give you just a little of the current makeup of Patterson. We're going to talk about Eastside High School primarily. Eastside High School is 55% Hispanic, 43% African American, 2% Caucasian. So you can see, the dynamics of, okay, as we talked about white flight. Okay, so you have a lot of students that may not come from families that have, the resources. And so that affects the school system. The taxes may not be enough really to support. And this is why also New Jersey had the concept of the Abbott districts for a while to help support places like Patterson, like Newark, Jersey City, and such. But we're going to go into the story of Joe Clark. But before that, very quickly, do you know any other alumni that come from Eastside? Just very quickly.
I don't know.
I feel like I did at some point, but no, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head.
I'm just going to give you a few. One is Bob Giraldi. He was the director of Beat It, Love is a Battlefield, Hello, and other music videos that we grew up with.
Yeah, I know them all.
Joe Taub. Anyone know Joe Taub?
Sounds familiar.
Well, his brother Henry and a guy named Frank Lautenberg, they developed this company called Automated Data Processing. ADP, where a lot of our paychecks come from.
Yes, that's right.
So Joe was actually an alumnus of the Eastside High School. Fetty Wap, the rapper and singer-songwriter. Mm-hmm. And Larry Doby, who we also spoke about on our episode of Breaking the Color Barrier in New Jersey in sports. Larry Doby was a Major League Hall of Famer and the first African-American American League player. Oh. Jackie Robinson being the first overall and for the National League. Basically, Jackie beat Larry by weeks.
Wow, I never heard of him. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and if you look into Larry Doby, he was fantastic.
I mean, we hear so much about Jackie Robinson. That's interesting. I'm gonna add that because I do a unit on him in my class.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, actually, if you want some material, but we also, as we said, we had an episode on Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in New Jersey before he did it. With the Dodgers.
I didn't know that. Okay.
The minor leagues.
I think we discussed that.
Minor league stadiums. He broke it here first, actually in Jersey City. Roosevelt Stadium.
Huh.
Right.
But back to Patterson. Back to Joe Clark. Joe Clark himself was born actually in Rochelle, Georgia in 1937 or 38. The official records had shown 38, but his daughter actually, since his passing a few days ago, has said he was actually born in 1937. But he moved with his family to Newark at the age of 6. And grew up in the Newark system, and the Newark education system. But he himself came from a poor family, so what Joe actually wound up doing is he found refuge a lot of times, and also when the winter months hit, he found heat at the local library. So Joe immersed himself in books at a young age. He wound up graduating from Newark Central High School, went on to get his bachelor's from William Patterson, fondly known to many of us as Bill on the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever go to that college, you'll see why.
You know why, yeah.
And then he earned his master's at Seton Hall University. And also, he's earned a doctorate from the U.S. Sports Academy. I did not know that was a thing, but
Me neither.
So, past his education, Clark actually went on into the military and went on to earn the rank of sergeant and a drill instructor in the U.S. Army Reserve. And it's here where his family said he developed a large respect for order and achievement. He came back and settled in South Orange. For those that are aware, that's actually where Seton Hall is.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And in 1972, got his first foray in the field of teaching in the Patterson School District as a grade school teacher. He taught remedial reading, and he also served, following that, as a director of camps and playgrounds in Essex County, which is a little odd because Patterson is Passaic County. In fact, it's the county seat of Passaic County. Mm-hmm. But yes, he also was there serving as the director of camps and playgrounds for Essex County. In 1979, he actually got his big first challenge where they offered him the position of principal of public school number 6 grammar school in Patterson, which was a failing school in actually one of Patterson's, at the time, one of the worst neighborhoods economically. And, there was a lot of problems with crime at that point in that area. Nearly 90% of the school's mostly African-American and Hispanic students at the time read below grade level when he arrived. But under his administration, Clark actually turned the school around, increased the reading level of all these students to be at least on par of where they were supposed to be. And people called it the Miracle on Carroll Street, which I believe is where Public School 6 was in Patterson. This caught the eye of a lot of members of the Board of Education and local, the mayor and other local, what's the word I'm looking for? Politicians.
Mm-hmm.
And in 82, some of the members of the board, including William Pascrell, quickly, both of you, do you know who William Pascrell is?
He's a congressman.
Yes, he is.
Very good.
He's actually the New Jersey representative for the 9th Congressional District. Well, at the time, he saw what Joe Clark was doing there, and he lobbied to have Joe assigned as principal of Eastside High School, which is on the east side of Patterson. Go figure. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately was also failing at that time. Now, Joe Clark went on to accept the role as principal. And he began a tenure that was both lauded and criticized at the same time for his approach. Now, being that you both have seen the movie Lean on Me, you are kind of familiar with his approach of what
his tactics.
The tactics that he used at the high school. Mm-hmm. Can neither of you name some of those tactics?
Well, he carried a baseball bat, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
A Willie Mays big stick, 36 inches.
Right.
To be precise.
Precise.
He changed the doors shut on the building on Eastside High School.
Yes. Yeah, yes, that's right.
Yes, he chained and padlocked the doors on the high school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Yeah, if you also remember, he also carried a bullhorn around.
Mm-hmm.
That
Oh,
was
yeah,
one of
right.
his other calling cards. But if you remember the movie, one of the big scenes near the beginning, when he first becomes principal in the movie on his first day, and this is where we're going to break the Hollywood magic here. On his first day, he rounded up 300 students that were the drug dealers, abusers, vandals, etc., and he expelled them. Well, let's get into reality. What Joe Clark actually did. In his first year, he did wind up expelling 300 students. In the first couple of months, the newer juniors and seniors that had passed or current at the time, like poor attendance, like they weren't showing up or barely showed up, and consequently poor grades, those are the ones that he had expelled.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't the in front of the school, not in the school auditorium, what's the word, but in front of the student body, the whole show as it was, but there was some degree of truth to that. He did expel 300 students in his first year as the principal of Eastside High.
Mhm.
Now, in hindsight, was that the right move? Was that not the right move?
It's
Debatable.
open to debate. Yeah, open to debate, right?
Yeah, very, very open to debate.
Yeah.
Because now his, besides to turn around the high school, his other goal was so the state of New Jersey did not, let me find the word, come in with state intervention, where basically the New Jersey commissioner, the state commissioner, has a little more control of the local district versus, what the state commissioner does now.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a, I don't know, how would you put it, Pedro? How does, like when working from the state down to the local districts, how would that work?
I don't think they get involved in such specifics. There's a curriculum handed down and there's assessments handed down. So there's policy put in place, but they don't tend to respond to individual situations.
The minutia of
Mm-hmm.
of what goes on locally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what they were worried about in Patterson was that the New Jersey, government would actually come in and actually take control of the district, which had been done actually in Newark.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, the expelling of 300 students, was that good or bad? Well, it helped maybe the school and the students that remained, but did it help the students that he expelled? How many of them could still have been reached? So this is a debate that you can go either side with. Now, in Clark's words was, he said there were 3,500 in that school. You cannot have 300 or 400 students disrupting the educational process. I extricated them to another abode, meaning, he expelled them. Now, going over the bat, he said the bat was not a threat, but a choice. That students can see it, that they could either strike out or hit a home run.
Symbolic.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Word gaslighting comes to mind on that, but
were these, who do you take at their word here? But Clark did institute some policies that, when you look at them, some of them good, some of them maybe. One, the halls were very crowded at Eastside, so he actually instituted a very simple policy: when walking in the halls, keep to the right. so people didn't get stuck and people, congregate, or, fights and other things that may break out when they may be hanging out in one spot. Speaking of not hanging out in one spot, no loitering, no profanity, no revealing clothes, no hats. I guess Joe Clark was a fan of the 80s group Men Without Hats, I guess. He too was trying to practice the safety dance. Now, graffiti, vandalism, physical violence, verbal or physical threats, defiance of authority, all brought automatic suspension. Tardiness and class cutting were punished by having to scrub down said graffiti or scrub the toilets. So now looking at those policies, yeah, some of those make sense. Some of those may be a little more on the extreme side. So I don't know. What are your takes? Like, if someone said, okay, tomorrow at your job, or Pedro, okay, everything's over, we're back in school, these are the rules now. What would you think?
You could plead the fifth too.
Wow. I would say, what are they doing at Phillips Exeter Academy? Because that's not what they're doing. I would say that there is no evidence to say that this is best practices in the way you treat children. And that's what they are. They're children. They're not thugs. They're not criminals. They're not drug dealers. They're human beings. They're children. And it's appalling to me. I consider his reign at Eastside to be a tragedy. And when I think about how my whole goal is to reach whoever I can, I think of, I don't know if you've heard there's a little story that's been told over and over again, like an inspirational story about a little girl who sees a bunch of starfish on a beach, and there's so many of them and they're dying on the beach, and she throws them back, and somebody says, there's no way you can throw back all of them. You can't make a difference. And she says, but I can for that one that I threw back is going to survive. And that's how I look at education. It's he did the opposite of that. And we talk now all the time about the school to prison pipeline, about how schools are so institutional as to be designed to prepare kids to do time. I'm strong opinions about this type of approach. It would not fly in Alpine. It would not fly in Ridgewood. And it's not because those children are fundamentally better. It's because they're white.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. Joe Clark
and well off. Those are
and
very
affluent
areas.
Joe Clark got a pass because he was a black man, but what he was doing was very much part of upholding a sort of a white supremacist culture of beat these children into submission. And maybe he didn't use that BAP, but they knew what it meant. And I just feel like it's such a tragedy that maybe 5 of those kids could have been reached, but throwing them out of school can't have helped.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You reach 0 at that point. Now, like the devil's advocate, do have a better reach of the ones that are still in school, because the ones that are not there, it could be argued.
Yes, but I don't think it's one or the other.
There we go. Yeah, it's not.
It's not you throw out the bad kids and keep the good kids. It's you find why certain kids are acting a particular way, and what do they need? What are their needs? Because no one's born, like in my class, I don't have any kids saying, I want to grow up and be a drug dealer. And yet I know
I would
statistically
hope
some of them will. Some of them will get involved in things that are not legal. Although drug dealing might actually be a really, never mind. That's a whole different issue. Things are changing there. But none of them grew up wanting to be trouble, wanting to cause trouble or hurt people. There were little children, and for some reason that ended up being the best thing they could do at the time. Wasn't a good thing. So what do we do? You know, that's what I feel like is the true challenge of teachers, because when I teach kids who have a stable home life, my job is, it's not even a job. All I have to do is kind of hand them the materials and they can do it. It's
Got it.
these kids who are broken and hurting and looking for something.
Right.
So I don't think that those 300 kids should have been left to wreak havoc and disrupt the educational system. But I do think there are other solutions, and there's a lot going on now in education, which is very exciting, about finding those solutions.
And I'm sure there's probably been also like educational studies that prove you right, which you're in terms of the approach to teaching, right? Yeah, I'm saying what the proper approach is for teaching students.
Right. So one of the buzzwords, one of the buzz acronyms, there's so many acronyms, is SEL, which is social and emotional learning, and really teaching kids what makes them tick and how to respond differently to different stimuli and those sorts of things. And an interesting place, although it's not in Oakland, New Jersey, it's in Oakland, California, but there's a whole movement out there that started with restorative justice in the schools, which is really teaching kids to take responsibility for their own behavior and find a way to correct what's going on. So an example of it would be, you drew on the walls of the school. That's graffiti. It is your job to correct that problem. And at the same time, to talk about how it harmed other people and what you could have done instead,
Right.
So there's a lot of really exciting new ways of approaching what he approached.
Exactly. Gotcha.
Now again, just so people again take this into context. The 80s were a different time. Yeah, a different mindset at the time.
Sure.
So there were things that were extreme at times, and Joe was, he was an example of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, also to de-hollowify some of these other things, you mentioned the padlocks on the doors. Now, Clark said that chaining and padlocking the doors during the school day was to keep out the drug dealers and the thugs. And in the movie, he's arrested, and what happens is a lot of his students come to actually, come to press for his release.
Right.
Guess what? That's Hollywood magic. That never happened.
Surprise.
In reality, he did padlock the doors, chain and padlock, the doors. But a court order was issued to remove the chains, and Clark complied. But what happened afterwards, Patterson police officers actually patrolled outside Eastside High School. That's actually what happened. Yeah. So they would. Again, sorry to break the aura of Hollywood, everyone, but
that's a reasonable solution. You're not chained in if the building's on fire, but you're still protecting the students.
And that was one of the things. He was in trouble and at odds a lot of times with the fire chief, which in the movie, the fire chief is one of the ones that's actually working with one of the parents and the mayor to actually kind of set a trap for Joe Clark. Well, they didn't set a trap for Joe Clark. There wasn't. In fact, the mayor was actually one of his biggest supporters. That was Mayor Frank X. Graves Jr. He was one of Clark's earliest supporters. So, that part of the film, also not true. But there were, in 1984, some teachers that had grown so frustrated with Clark and his policies, they actually had a secret after-school meeting at the Masonic Temple to figure out how to deal with him. But Clark intercepted that and had the leaders transferred to another school.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So these are the things that did happen with Joe Clark. Now, in the movie, the music teacher also had some run-ins with Clark about teaching the alma mater, the school anthem for Eastside High. Yes, there was an actual run-in with the music teacher, but the the music teacher actually did teach the students there the alma mater, the school anthem, but because of differences between her and Clark, they actually got transferred to another school 2 years after their initial altercation.
Mm.
Now, one of the other things that Clark was known for was, he was known as having a very broad, like not broad, but very well-versed vocabulary. People called it like $100 vocabulary, and but of course, like as part of his vocabulary, he called some of the unruly students, parasites, miscreants. These were some of the $100 words that he used, and some of the disloyal teachers to him, surreptitious snakes. I practiced that word earlier because like I was tripping over the word surreptitious. So, but now here's the other part of Joe Clark, though. As much as there was a lot that was contentious, he actually did care about a lot of the students, and some of the things that he actually did that people weren't aware of was students that couldn't afford coats. He actually made sure that they actually got coats so they were not cold during the winter months. He actually tried to actually get to, like, one of the parts of the movie is like, he's coming around with his bullhorn and coming around to students at the table and in the halls. That was part of his regular process. He wanted to get to know all of the students of Eastside personally, so he could help them. So when you look at Joe Clark as a whole, there was a lot maybe that really shouldn't have been, but you know what? There was good to what he was trying to do, and there was good to what he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably true of everybody, right? There's
That is something.
true.
Mm-hmm.
It's some of his former students, though. They actually see Della McCall Fisher. She was an Eastside student. She's actually now the chief of staff of Patterson Mayor Andre Saya's administration. She actually goes on to say, he's responsible for the person I am today. He always made me feel like there was nothing I couldn't do. She comes to say that, although Clark may have taken her under his wing, he also showed tough love as well. One time he actually made her feel so bad for being tardy that she actually resolved for the rest of her tenure at Eastside High, she would never arrive later than he did. So for the next 2 years, she got to school no later than 6:30 a.m. so she would beat Joe Clark in every day. And also, one of the ways that he also helped her was she needed to take a science test, but she had no babysitter. She actually, at the time, she had a 3-year-old son. So she went to Joe Clark's office and dropped her son off there and said, I need to take this test. Mr. Clark said, okay, take the test. He basically babysat for her. So she could actually, go with her, go on and take care of her schoolwork. So yes, there was good that, but as you said, there for most people there is good, but we don't always hear about it. Another a person actually said Mayor Andre Saya, he didn't actually he wasn't in Eastside when Joe Clark was principal. He actually came in a couple of years later, but he actually went to an anti-violence forum in Secaucus where Clark spoke, because after his tenure as principal of Eastside, he went on the lecture circuit for about 6 or 7 years. Saya actually approached Clark and said, Mr. Clark, I admire and respect you. He shook my hand and said, son, what are you doing with yourself? And he said, my plan is to go to college. Clark replied, that's the right answer.
There you go.
So, he did have best interests for some of the students in mind, but again, we go back to the 300 that he, expelled the first year. Not really them.
Right.
Clark was actually offered a White House education post by President at the time, Ronald Reagan, but Clark declined, being loyal to Eastside. Now, of course, his tactics also gained media attention, and he found himself as the center of a national debate on educational reform of inner-city schools. He made the cover of Time magazine in February 1988 and went the talk show and news program circuit rounds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did you either of you like read any of his the articles about him, or see any of his appearances on, like, say, Arsenio Hall or some of the other programs back then?
Yeah, I think I did see like the one when he was on Arsenio Hall. I know when he did like the talk show circuit, like one or two of his appearances. I vaguely recall watching them. Yeah. Got it. So,
how about yourself, Pedro?
Yeah, I don't remember specifically. I mean, I remember him being very well known, of course.
mhm.
Yeah,
He was kind of like a household name for a while.
correct. And of course, in '89, when the movie Lean on Me came out,
Mm-hmm.
that for those who didn't know him yet, well, here we go. Now, the movie, Joe Clark says, well, even though he had some qualms about Morgan Freeman portraying him because he didn't think Morgan Freeman was stern enough, but I think acting wise, Morgan gave a
Morgan Freeman's God. I mean,
literally,
Right,
in fact,
exactly.
when you saw Bruce Almighty or Evan Almighty, he was God. but it was a fantastic movie, but things were definitely stretched. But Joe Clark said it was about 95% accurate.
Mhm.
And as we've gone over, maybe 95 was not the percentage. But here's the thing. When we went to percentages, what Joe Clark was brought in to do was to raise the testing scores at Eastside High and prevent the state of New Jersey from taking over. Did he raise the test scores? Yes. He did raise the test scores. Now, how did he raise the test scores?
Right.
Because now you have to factor in, for the students that he wound up expelling, was that addition by subtraction? Did the test scores go up because of the students that were low performing that he had expelled? Hey, you take enough of the low end of you take a bunch of numbers, take the low numbers off, now average them out. Of course, you're going to be higher.
Mm-hmm.
That's how math works, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, Math 101.
But again, it's up for debate how much was that and how much it was for the actual effect he had on the student body of Eastside.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in '89, that's when the movie came out, Lean on Me, and he was actually on the road a little bit promoting the movie. At the same time, a group of young men at Eastside High, they had a student assembly, and these young gentlemen stripped down to their G-strings during the assembly. And because Clark was not there to supervise what was going on, he got suspended for a week. So,
he did. Joe Clark did.
Joe Clark got suspended for not being there to supervise the school that he was supposed to be taking care of at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
But also in 1989, Joe Clark wound up having heart surgery. And 2 months later, after his surgery, he wound up in July of 1989, he wound up resigning as principal of Eastside High.
Mm-hmm.
After which He went on the lecture circuit. He then went on to be the director of the Essex County Youth Detention Center in Newark, where, if you could guess, some of his methods were criticized.
Surprise.
Yeah, there was a couple of episodes of, for 2 days, some detainees, which, again, these are kid detainees. These are not, adults, but kid detainees were cuffed and shackled for 2 straight days.
Wow.
But Clark says this was done only after several violent episodes in which said detainees actually hurled excrement at guards. So, did the punishment fit the crime? Again, I cannot say that was the right thing to do, nor can I say I was there and that's the wrong thing to do. But yeah, I'm thinking though maybe it wasn't the best thing to do. Keep kids shackled for 2 days.
No, right.
That's usually not a good thing.
Right.
But he retired from his position at the detention center in 2002 and retired to Gainesville, Florida, where on December 29th, 2020, he passed.
Mm-hmm.
So, just in final summation, what he did back in the 80s, did it improve things at the high school? Scores went up. He did give a sense of order to the high school because prior to that, things were, from reports, extremely chaotic. But again, some of the methods used and some of the practices, such as expelling students, maybe not the best things to do. You're not taking those students in mind when considering education. There, you're kind of taking them out of the equation at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your feelings, Petra?
So it reminds me. I've done a lot of reading about just sort of like generational trauma, things like that, and I know that a lot of Black parents have sort of come up with the idea that they need to control their children or the world will do it for them, right? Because the world is not going to be easy on them.
No.
I feel like maybe he was a product of that type of thinking. Like, if I could have beat you into submission, then the world won't. So I think that it may have been done from a loving approach. I think the reason he became famous for it was because he made a lot of people really comfortable. I think it made a lot of people comfortable to see him tame these people, these children who,
got it,
suburban America, white America thought needed taming.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not hostile towards him. I think he probably had his intentions were good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that his strategy was well intentioned, and it may have been what he knew worked. Like in a panic, the way you might grab someone as they're about to fall off a cliff, and you might hurt them doing it. But I'm very happy to know that we've learned better ways. And hopefully are supporting those kids and finding ways to give them a path to success that's not crushing them that way. So,
and just a little final note also, what Joe Clark's taking on the East Side principalship, what his goal was. Yes, he did raise scores, but the state of New Jersey still intervened after some years and is still currently one of the 3 districts, the others being Newark and Jersey City, that are still under New Jersey state control. But it's not a constant control. It's when the state needs to step in, they will step in locally.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for those that have not seen the movie, I would recommend the movie. It's a great movie. It is a feel good movie, but when you actually start looking at and considering the other things that happen in that movie, maybe you don't feel as good as you might once have felt. Sorry to do that to you, everyone, but it's just that's reality.
It's a lot to chew on. It's a lot to chew on, and
It is.
Yeah, that's true.
I think if we could do one thing better in the upcoming year, it's to operate in the gray. Not everything's all good or all bad. It's
true.
That's
it's a lot
said.
of nuance.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're going to shift here, and Pete, this is the time we would like to play some games.
This has got to be a really quick, Nick, because I have to start work in like 2 minutes.
Got it. Okay, quick game.
So we'll just do filming in Paterson, New Jersey. I'm just going to name 3 movies, and you have to tell me whether or not it is being filmed, was filmed in Paterson, New Jersey. So let's start number 1, West Side Story, the new Steven Spielberg film.
The new one. Oh.
Are they filming in Paterson, New Jersey?
I'm going to say, I thought I did read something about that. So I'm going to say yes.
I'm going to guess yes.
And the answer is yes, correct.
All
they
right.
are currently, not currently, I guess they are currently still filming in New Jersey. And another trivia side, right? Another trivia side fact is that the woman who's playing Maria, her name is Rachel Zegler. She's from Clifton, New Jersey.
And I actually believe she was a student in Hackensack for a while.
Get out.
Or she performed in some of the Hackensack recreational theater, something like that. She's got some
very
connect.
cool.
Yeah,
very
nice.
Cool. We'll go on to the Eddie Murphy Arsenio Hall new vehicle, Coming to America, the sequel to Coming to America. Now, was that filmed in Paterson, New Jersey? At least parts of it, let's say, right?
I'm going to say yes because of your caveat about at least parts of it.
I know. I realized that. I showed my poker hand there,
Yeah. You know what? Just to be devil's advocate, I'm going to say, even though you said that, you're trying to mislead us. And I'm going to say no, but I'm sure that the answer is yes here. But
unfortunately, Nick, not unfortunately or fortunately, the answer is yes. From what I read, in fact, they filmed on Market Street.
Very cool.
Yeah, I don't know the specific scenes or anything like that, but yes, that was one of films. Let's do one last one here. How about The Devil's Advocate? Now that was with Al Pacino and Keanu Reeves. Al Pacino was the devil, right?
Yes.
Nick, I believe in that movie.
Yes, and then Keanu Reeves was the advocate. Yeah.
Yes, right. The protege.
I know saw that, and I don't remember it.
I know something special about this movie too, but I'm going to say no. But I'm also going to throw in what I actually know about this movie.
Okay.
What do you say, Pedro?
I just feel like it's time to say no. I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm going to guess no.
And what I'm going to say is, I know parts of this movie, the courtroom scenes, were filmed at the Bergen County Courthouse in Hackensack, New Jersey.
Well, Nick, you've said it all. Yes, you are. The answer is no. It was not filmed in Paterson, New Jersey. It was filmed in Hackensack, New Jersey. So there you go. For at least parts of it, right? Just as you Hackensack Court. So.
Excellent.
Well, yeah, Nick, I got to cut and run because I have 1 minute to log on.
Okay.
So
thank you.
I'm going to say a big thank you to Pedro for coming on to the podcast and offering so much valuable insight. And I learned a lot. And fantastic.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really nice. It was fun.
No, this was excellent, Pete. I know you gotta go.
I gotta go. So
I'm glad you have a short
signing
commute.
off, but thanks to everyone out there. And we'll see you on the next podcast, right?
All right.
Yes.
Good.
All right,
Take care. Thanks a lot.
See you.
Bye.
And as Pete said, Pedro, thank you so much for being our guest today and providing, the information, the feedback, the perspective of a New Jersey teacher.
I appreciate you asking me. It was really interesting. It was very nice to be on here.
And by the way, our friend Stuart Greenberg said a great conversation, gave me a lot to think about. So, and he says, thank you, Nick and Pedro.
Thank you.
It is Pedro, not Pedro. Yes, Pedro. Okay.
I know. My parents cursed me with this, with the confusion of a lifetime.
But again, thank you. I know this was also your first podcast. So
it was, yeah. So it was a great experience.
You survived.
Yay! I did. You made it very comfortable. Thank you.
And please tell your friends about this. If they would like to watch, we will have the playback of this on our webpage, and we will also have the podcast available in audio form within the next few days. And you can catch the podcast on most streaming apps: iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and the like. So guess what? You're going to be all over the internet now, Pedro.
Great.
So please, and please tell your friends, in teaching though, we really appreciate what they do.
Thank you. That'll mean a lot to them.
Even though, people may not show it all the time. And I was glad actually to be part of, and I'm hoping that it starts back up again, once things are settled. Like I know in Hackensack, what we were talking about with we need space. Mm-hmm. Like I was part of the citizen committee that at last time, so hopefully I can do that again as well.
Right, because it's always great to have input.
Yeah, I would like to give back to the Hackensack education system.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah.
So again, thank you everyone listening.
Thank you.
And I know we went over time. Yeah, Ming, I'll take care of you. And for anyone that wants to start a podcast, also go to a shared universe. A shared universe. What's it? Is it podcaststudio.com or is it shareduniverse.com? I'll double check. I always forget. And if you want to email us, we're whatexitpodcast@gmail.com. Please comment. Please tell your friends. And for What Exit Jersey Stories, I'm Nick Franco, and our guest today has been
Pedro Del Vecchio.
See, I'm
new. All right. Happy New Year. Thank you.